Forgot my last question.
I think we're talking about whether or not people checked in and out of the crime scene.
So, yes, when you were counting all of the names on the list, sir, that doesn't necessarily mean they were all there together at this. Does that necessarily mean they were all there together at the same time?
No.
One, please. This is Defense Exhibit
1027, Your Honor. Regarding this photograph, sir, do you recall that there was a palm tree at the front of the residence at 875 South Bundy?
Yes.
Now, the female who is in the white shirt, looking at this photograph, can you tell us whether she's standing out on the sidewalk or out on the grass?
Well, she's either on the sidewalk or the grass, because it appears that she's outside of that planted area that's right in front of her.
Mm-hmm. And the gentleman who's, let me use the laser. Can you see where I'm pointing with the laser, sir? See the gentleman whose shoulder is here?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell in this photograph whether he's standing on that walkway with the blood on it, or whether he's standing on the sidewalk area?
I can't be positive, but I'd say it looks like he's probably standing on the sidewalk.
overruled.
It looks to you like he's standing on the sidewalk, you said? What did you just say, sir?
That's an answer, Judge.
Overruled. Counsel can ask a clarifying question, especially when the witness is turned away, talking the other direction, which I didn't hear either.
What did you say, sir?
I said it appears as if he's standing on the sidewalk, but from this angle, I can't be sure exactly where he's standing.
Mm-hmm. This photograph, do you think it's a clear photograph in terms of the perspective of the crime scene?
Object to the form of that, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Criticize the photograph.
Sustained.
All right. See
Maybe
this
we can have
palm?
some expert testimony from our telephoto lenses back here as to distortion by various lenses.
Well, let me ask you this. You were at the crime scene, right?
Yes,
And you know the distances between things, right?
roughly.
Does this comport with your memory of the distances that you saw when you were there between the gate, the sidewalk, the walkway, the palm tree?
No, that's vague, and that's compound, and that's an unintelligible question.
You know, it is a compound question, and we did have a view of the scene by the jurors. They did view it for a significant period of time from across the street, and I think they know the perspectives. I think they took note of where the palm tree was.
I'd like to elicit some testimony so I have something in the record, though, Your Honor, that I can refer back to later.
Well, you can refer back to the view of the scene.
But with respect to this particular time, I'd like to be able to ask some questions about this witness's memory, if I may.
That's true. It's also noon.
Can I ask one more question then before we break?
One more.
Thank you. You see these officers down here, sir?
Yes.
Where do they appear to be in relationship to the palm tree?
Again, the depth perception is very bad, but I'd say they were standing in front of the palm tree, probably somewhere around the curb or in the street itself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the noon hour. Please remember my admonition to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. We'll see you back here at 1:30. Detective Phillips, you're excused. Order to return at 1:30.
Thank you.
All right. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. All right. All right, all the parties are again present. Counsel, anything we need to discuss before we invite the jurors to join us? All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please. We've now been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Detective Ronald Phillips is still on the witness stand. Good afternoon, Detective Phillips.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
You're reminded you're still under oath, and Ms. Clark, you may conclude your redirect.
Where was that picture? You recall we were talking about this photograph that was shown to you by the defense marked, I think, D1027?
Yes?
All right, I think when you left off, you were indicating that the police officer is shown in the right hand of the...
May I get down, Your Honor?
Yes. You were indicating that these police officers, I'm indicating with the laser light, you believe were standing either on the street or on the curb in front of the location?
Well, with
No,
depth perception,
I think that mistakes it, because I think you can tell us what we say, by recapitulating after lunch.
Overruled.
I think with the depth perception, it's very difficult to tell exactly where they're standing, but in relationship to the palm tree, I'd say they're either on the curb or possibly in the street, at least on this side of the walkway for sure.
And you indicated, let me ask you then, and this was the person that you indicated was where?
Well, I would say that person's on the other side of the palm tree, probably on the sidewalk area, but again, depth perception, I don't know if he's standing in the grass or on the sidewalk.
Hard to tell in this photograph, is it?
Impossible to tell.
And this person here, you indicated, I think, on the cross-examination was the photographer, Rokar?
Yes?
And can you tell where he is? Whether he's in the shrubbery or on the sidewalk?
I can't tell where he's standing.
Now, this person is the photographer that took pictures at the crime scene?
Yes?
And does a photographer have to walk into the crime scene in order to take photographs of the evidence?
Object to the form of that question, what do you have to do? I'll conclude your speculation.
Sustained.
How does a photographer get into a crime scene how does a photographer get to take pictures of the evidence?
Well, as the evidence is presented, the detective in charge of the investigation will ask him to take certain photographs as the investigation is taking place. He'll stand in the area or stand outside the area until some evidence or something that the investigating officer wants to be photographed comes along, and then he'll call him in to photograph that particular piece of evidence or item, and then he'll back off again. So he's ready to take photographs all along the crime scene.
Okay. So is this a person that has authority to be in the crime scene?
At the direction of the investigating officer, yes.
Okay. And then the person here that you indicated and here that you indicated are coroner's investigators?
Yes?
What do coroner investigators have to do with respect to the bodies?
Well, they have to prepare the bodies to be moved from the location. So they have to be in the area.
So do they have authority to be inside the crime scene?
Yes?
And what about this person here? You indicated Dennis Fung, the criminalist.
Yes?
What does a criminalist do at a crime scene?
Collect and book, prepare evidence. It's at a crime scene under the direction of an investigating officer or under his own direction as he goes along through the crime scene.
And does he have to be allowed into the crime scene in order to do that?
Yes?
So the four people that we see here, the photographer, the criminalist, the coroner's investigators that appear to be in the crime scene, all generally have authority to be there.
Yes, at the proper time.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, have a seat. Now, who's permitted to touch the body or do anything associated closely with the body of a homicide victim?
Well, the coroner's office is the only one allowed to touch the body and actually go through the pockets of the body and pull anything out of the pockets or off the body of the deceased. Homicide detectives don't do that. We don't move the bodies until the coroner's office arrives, and they actually do the moving of the body.
And they're the only ones allowed to move the body, are they?
Yes.
Your Honor, can you cut this is the People's 46. People's.
Now, you see this scene as you've identified it before, is that right, sir?
Yes.
See the palm tree there?
Yes.
And that palm tree, does that appear to be in the same location as the one shown in the earlier photograph?
Yes.
So someone... That's all. Now, let me ask you something, sir. You were shown a picture of a speed dialer inside of Nicole Brown's condominium, on which was marked Daddy.
Yes. Yes.
Could you tell if that Daddy referred to her father or the children's father?
It's called speculation, Your Honor.
If you can tell from the, if he can tell from the photograph,
I knew what you were saying.
if he can tell from the photograph, but he said he'd never seen it before.
That's right, so it's
Right,
relative
so-
security.
No,
Then-
it's all right. If he can tell from the photograph. Can you tell from the photograph who Daddy is?
No, sir.
If you had known that that was Mr. Simpson's phone number, would you have dialed it?
No,
Why not?
because I wanted to try and make the notification in person.
Sir, when you went to Rockingham, how long did you intend to spend there?
Your Honor, I think that's
This is foundational, Your Honor.
okay.
Or
As short a time as possible. I mean, we went there.
His answer is, Your Honor.
He hasn't...
sustain? He asked him this question.
And you went there, why?
Well, I went there to make a notification and to assist Mr. Simpson if he needed any assistance whatsoever. I needed to have his children picked up at West LA Station. I was going to offer him that service. I was also going to ask him, or at least try to make efforts that he did not go to the Bundy location to see that scene.
Was it your intention to return to the Bundy scene?
After Rockingham?
Yes.
No.
Now, do you happen to know in this particular case whether the coroner's representatives stayed around after the bodies of Ron and Nicole were moved?
No, I don't.
Do you know the photograph shown to you by defense counsel, D1027? Do you recall that photograph, the one I just showed you before the last one?
Yes?
Do you know what time that picture was taken?
No, I don't.
All right, you indicated that you spoke to Kathy Randa on the telephone, sir?
I spoke to a Kathy. I don't know her last name.
Before you spoke to her, when you asked Arnell where her father was, and she told you that she didn't know, was that...
This person's objection was about the hearsay.
This is what he's already testified to based upon his subsequent actions.
Hearsay was not clear to me.
He testified to it on direct and cross, Your Honor.
After he spoke to Arnell, what's the question?
I haven't been able to finish it.
What's the question? After he spoke to Arnell, what?
After you spoke to Arnell, and after you asked Arnell where her father was, and she told you she didn't know, did you go...
This part objected.
After he spoke to Arnell.
Okay. When... Your Honor, this is a subject matter he's testified to on direct and on cross before.
I realize that, but there's an objection at this point. He spoke to Arnell. Then
What did Arnell tell you about where her father was?
Seriously.
This explains subsequent conduct.
Overruled.
Arnell never told me where her father was.
What did she indicate to you?
Are you talking outside the house?
Yes,
Or
sir.
after we came inside the house?
Outside the house.
I asked her if she knew where her father was, and she made some gesture towards the house and said, "Isn't he in the house, or isn't he there?" Don't exactly recall what she said. And at that time, Phil Van Adder began talking to her, and I did not talk to her anymore.
Okay. And then inside the house, did you have further conversation with her about where her father was?
I asked her if she could find out where her father was at, and she told me that Kathy, his secretary, would know where her father was at, and that she would call her.
And then she made a phone call?
Yes?
And then you spoke to Kathy, is that what you testified to earlier?
Yes?
When you spoke to Kathy, did you tell her the defendant's ex-wife had been killed?
I believe I mentioned, not to Kathy, no.
All right, and then you indicated that you called the defendant in Chicago.
Yes?
Now, after you advised him that his ex-wife had been killed, you indicated on cross-examination that he said, "What do you mean she's been killed? Oh my God, Nicole is dead." You recall that testimony?
Yes?
Was there any pause between his question, "What do you mean she's been killed?" and "Oh my God, Nicole is dead"?
Object to the form of that question. Pause. You've already described this for us. I object to the form of this question. It's improper.
Your Honor, I object to counsel speaking
Wait.
objections.
Overruled.
He became upset, made that statement, and then he continued to be upset and continued to talk on the telephone to himself. And it took me several seconds to get him to talk to me again, to have him listen to me. He seemed very, very upset.
Was there any pause after the question, after this statement, "What do you mean she's been killed"?
No?
Did you have an opportunity to offer any information or interject?
Object to the form of that question.
Overruled.
No.
And did he ever repeat, "What do you mean she's been killed" after that one time?
No, he just kept repeating over and over again that Nicole had been killed.
Did he ever ask about the children before you brought up that subject, about where they were?
No, eventually when I got his attention again is when I mentioned the children, and you have to remember this conversation took place very quickly. He was talking and I was talking, and everybody was a little bit excited.
But you were the one who brought up the children first.
Well, I told him, I says, "Mr. Simpson, try to get a hold of yourself. I have your children at the police station."
Okay. And at that point, he asked you, "Why are they at the station?"
Yes?
And was it after that point that he told you he'd take the next flight?
Yes?
And you then, at some point you offered him your pager number. Yes, you testified. When was that?
That was towards the end of the conversation when I said, "If you need something, take my pager number down and my office number down and give me a call if I can do anything for you." And then when I got back to the station later on that day, there was a message that he had called.
So he did take your pager number down when you gave it to him.
I'll object to that, Your Honor. That assumes the fact that I never.
Sustained.
But after you gave the pager number, he did in fact page you.
As I said, I gave him my pager number and my office number. He did not page me. He called me at the office, left a message through the desk personnel at the office, and that's the pink slip I got as a message that Mr. Simpson had called. He did not call me on my pager.
Okay. And was it after... And did his request to speak to Arnell conclude your conversation?
Yes, I did not talk to him again.
Now, counsel was showing you your report. I'm going to show you... Let's see. I believe Mr. Cochran ended at the end of page 1. Let's go on to page 2. At the end of their report, ask you to read that?
To himself.
Yes. As he's doing.
Yes. I didn't do that.
All right, at the end of your report, sir, what did you put down?
Object, Your Honor. Please read the report and testify.
Sustained.
What's the date, but that's the improper question.
It's hearsay. Sustained.
It's also been asked and answered, it's also improper.
It has not been
No.
asked and answered, Your
I've
Honor.
already sustained it as hearsay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, did you... When you informed the defendant that his ex-wife had been killed, did you say she had been murdered?
No, I said she'd been killed.
Did he ask you if it was in a traffic accident?
Object, this has been covered in direct examination, it's improper redirect examination, and it's irrelevant material we asked about traffic accident. And this is improper redirect examination.
Overruled.
No.
And did you find that to be unusual, sir?
Object to that, Your Honor, that's unusual. Object to
Sus-
that, there is no standard.
Sustained.
Okay.
All right. Have you made any notifications to next
Excuse
of...
me, counsel, we're getting a little sloppy on the speaking objections on both sides here. So no, trust me, on both sides. So at this point, make your objection, state one of 12 recognized legal grounds to object. I'll rule. If I need an explanation, I'll ask for it. Thank you. Proceed.
How many notifications of death have you made to next of kin in your years as a police officer and detective?
I don't know, far too many, I'm sure. Couple hundred.
And was it common in your experience for next of kin to ask questions about how the homicide had occurred?
Object to the form of the question as to what, object to the form of that question, Your Honor, and I would be glad to embellish it.
Overruled. You can answer that question, yes or no.
The question again, please?
Is it common in your experience for the next of kin to ask questions as to how the death occurred?
It usually occurs that way, yes.
And so did you find the defendant's response to be unusual
Object
in
to
your
that,
experience?
I object to the form of that question, Your Honor.
Sustained. Calls for speculation.
His belief about his own...
Let me just talk to you briefly without the reporter.
Still sidebar.
I know.
Sidebar, Your Honor.
I know. Give me just 2 seconds here.
Sure.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Sir, did anyone, while you were at Rockingham that morning, did anyone tell you what time the defendant actually left for the airport?
No.
I think you testified earlier that Kathy told you that he took a red-eye flight.
That's correct.
And that was when you were on the telephone,
Yes.
but no specific time was mentioned to you?
No, she just said he took a red eye to Chicago that night before.
Did she tell you what airline?
I don't believe she did.
Okay. Now, after she told you that, did you go out and tell somebody that the defendant had taken a red-eye flight to Chicago?
Didn't tell him that she'd taken a red-eye flight, no.
What did you say?
Just said I'd made contact and talked to Mr. Simpson in Chicago.
Now, sometime after that telephone conversation, you stated that you were in the breakfast room of the location and that Detective Mark Furman came to see you.
Yes?
How long after the telephone conversation was that?
Five minutes, no more than 10 minutes, somewhere in that area.
Okay. Was he anywhere near you when you were having the telephone conversation?
No?
He came walking in from the outside. Was that what you testified to?
Yes?
When you made contact with him, did you tell him that you just heard the defendant took a red-eye flight to Chicago?
No?
What was your conversation with him when you saw him in the breakfast room?
He wanted to talk to me. He wanted to show me something, so I went with him and he showed me what he wanted to show me. It was basically his conversation explaining to me what he had found.
And did you tell him anything about your conversation with Kathy?
I may have mentioned to him that I made contact with Mr. Simpson. I suppose that might have happened, but that would have just been in passing.
Just that you talked to him?
I'm sure I told everybody there at some time or another that I'd made contact with him.
And, sir, did you make note in your report of the defendant's reaction to the notification call you made to the defendant in Chicago?
Yes?
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Phillips, with regard to the photographs of the shoes that we saw of the various detectives, were your shoes also photographed?
No.
And were Detective Furman's shoes photographed?
No.
Were Phillips or Van Adder's shoes photographed?
No.
And I believe I asked you this, but did you have the shoe sizes of any of these officers at all?
No, sir.
And these shoes were photographed at West LA Station?
Yes, it was done in an interview room in West LA Station, and most of them were done with the officer wearing the shoe and just putting his foot up onto a table.
Do you have a log indicating what days those shoes were photographed on?
No, as I said, it occurred over several days, 3 or 4 days, because the officers have days off, and there were several officers to do, so I just put a list down in the watch commander's office that when you come to work, come see Detective Phillips.
Is it true that most officers have at least 2 pair of shoes?
I have no idea.
How many? You didn't wear uniforms very much back then, but when you last wore a uniform, did you have more than 2 pairs of department issue shoes?
No, I've only had 1 pair of uniform shoes at a time.
All right, if one of the officers who testified here, for instance, Risky, indicated he had 2 pairs of shoes, was there any memo ever given to the officers to take a picture of the shoes you were wearing on June 12th or June 13th?
I asked every officer that came up if they had the shoes on that they wore on June 12th to June 13th. And I believe every one of them had the same shoes on.
But these officers had continued, as far as you know, had continued to wear these shoes for whatever period of time before they took the photographs, which we saw. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In other words, they weren't all taken the same day. Some were taken within a week. Is that correct?
Over a period of 3, 4 days, 5 days, maybe even.
Now, you said that in response to one of Ms. Clark's questions that it is unusual to have a double homicide in the Brentwood area. Is that correct?
I think it is, yes.
And in the time you've been out there working in homicide, you've had obviously a number of homicides out in that area also, have you not?
Yes.
And you've had some double homicides out there also, have you not?
I don't recall. Well, we've had murder-suicides where one person kills somebody and then kills themselves, and that would be a murder-suicide, but that's,
You've had cases where you've had two bodies and you had to investigate it and make a determination, right?
yeah, murder-suicide.
Okay, that'd be two bodies, right?
Yes, sir.
At least two.
That would
All
not
right.
be a double homicide.
All right. And in that connection, when you talked to the coroner's office, there was nothing which prohibited you from saying, we have a double homicide, I'm going to call you back later, all I want to do is get some numbers and give you the first call. You didn't have to say, we have a double homicide in Brentwood and it involves O.J. Simpson, did you?
Well, they asked me what I had, and I told them I had a double homicide, and because I would have told them if I hadn't had a double homicide, I would have told them I had a murder-suicide.
All right? But the point I was asking you, there was no requirement in your regulations for you to say that you had a double homicide involving O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, was it?
There is nothing.
Now, that's something you volunteered, isn't that correct?
Yes, yes, it is.
And would you agree with me by your saying that that tended to exacerbate the interest in this case, at least in behalf of Mr. Willis, who you shared this information with,
Well, it was a two-edged sword. It was going to come back to haunt me either way.
right? But we don't know how it would have been if you hadn't told him, do we?
No, we don't.
Because you told him, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
All right. Now, on this job that these officers work in West Los Angeles, we're not going to ask you the job, but this was a moonlighting job that a number of officers worked on in West Los Angeles. Is that correct?
No,
Well, some officers worked on it.
just Mark Furman and I myself, I believe, were the only ones from West Los Angeles that worked up there.
There are other officers who worked there, though?
Yes, sir.
All right. Other LAPD officers, I mean.
I believe they're LAPD. I believe they're LASO.
Sheriffs.
I believe there's some retired from other jurisdictions also,
How'd you find out about that job?
through a mutual friend.
All right, and then you went, did you go first, or did Detective Furman go first?
I believe that the individual who got us the job took over a situation that already existed, and there was several of us all hired at the same time, maybe 10 or 15 of us all hired at the same time, the same night, as far as going to an orientation, and then we started our shifts. So I think we all started at the same time, and I'm not positive Mark Furman was in that initial group, but he probably could have been.
If he was not in the initial group, did you tell him about this particular position?
No, he also knows the same individual.
All right, so you both knew about it, and you both started working on this job, and you worked for approximately a year on that job at least, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, it's true, is it not, sir, that pursuant to the Los Angeles Police Department homicide manual, evidence should be booked as soon as possible, and under no circumstances should evidence be retained by a particular detective in the course of that investigation. Isn't that true?
Well, I wouldn't know what circumstances you were talking about. Each detective handles his own cases his own way.
Well, you wouldn't want to, and you're, as an experienced LAPD detective, you wouldn't carry evidence home, would you, that you picked up at a scene?
Cede the scope. Cede the scope or redirect.
I would ask the court to allow me just for this one question to ask that question, Your Honor. Counsel opened with regard to the shoes.
Sustain.
Now, with regard to, you were asked some questions about Special Order Number 21. And again, you've never had occasion to speak with Chief Willie Williams about that particular order, have you?
No, I have not.
And the background or his reason for issuing it?
No, I have not.
And in that order, in several places, it talks about the coroner being immediately notified, does it not?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that for the coroner to arrive at a scene 9 hours after the discovery of bodies, that is not immediate under any stretch of the imagination?
Objection, that's argument.
Overruled. He can answer.
It would depend on the circumstances that led up to that, sir. Each homicide case has its own set of circumstances which dictate time, dictate what we do and how things are done. Each case is a story of its own.
I understand
They're
that.
not all the same.
I understand that. Would you agree with me that 9 hours is not immediate? Would you agree with that?
9 hours is not immediate as far as taking the bodies away from a crime scene, no.
All right, thank you. You have no recollection at all of whether or not the ice cream in this cup you saw on that banister was vanilla or strawberry or chocolate chip cookie dough, do you?
I have no idea what that ice cream was, sir.
And you've never seen a picture of it, do you? Have you?
No, sir.
Now, with regard to just a question or two regarding Defendant's 1027. Put that right there. In Defendant's 1027, you're not able to see in Defendant's 1027 where that yellow tape is, can you?
No, sir.
And as I understand it, were you able to identify this person? Pick a day, you step down if you can. Were you able to identify that lady, that appears to be a lady there in the foreground with a white blouse or shirt on?
I do not know who that person is.
Do you know the name of an LAPD trainee criminalist by the name of Mazzola, M-A-Z-Z-O-L-A?
I don't believe I've ever met that person, sir.
Did you see a female by the name of Mazzola at that scene that morning with Fung?
Objection. He said he's never heard of it.
I'm asking if he saw a female. Let me
He
ask
said
this
by
way.
the name of Mazzola.
Well, let me
Yes, he
strike
did.
by the name of Mazzola.
Right.
Did you see a female accompanying Fung at the scene that morning, either at Rockingham or at Bundy?
No.
Now, lest we give coroners a bad name, the coroner's office is not just a body removal service for the police department, are they?
No, they're not.
In fact, the Los Angeles County coroner has an independent obligation to conduct their own investigation regarding the time of death. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we are dealing with specially trained individuals who have an expertise in seeking to determine the time of death with regard to bodies. Isn't that correct? No,
Overruled.
Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the coroner's office, in your 28 years, you know that the coroner's office can assist in determining the time of death, and generally coroners do come to court and testify. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They also assist in determining the cause of death. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They also assist in determining the type of weapons, the number of weapons used in a particular incident. Isn't that correct? Just a few more questions, Your
I'm
Honor.
going to allow a little leeway here.
Thank you.
Yes.
And in the course of their investigation, they can also assist in the identity of perpetrators on occasion. Is that correct?
They can help to assist in that, yes.
And in addition to the coroner's office, the criminalists also play a vital role in retrieving evidence quickly before it starts to break down or degrade and become any way affected by the elements. Isn't that correct?
I'm not a criminalist, sir.
All right, but you've used criminalists throughout your career, have you
Yes.
not? And you know it's important to get the criminalists out there early to collect the evidence. Isn't that right?
Get a criminalist out there to collect the evidence is why we bring them out, yes.
That's right. And that's what presumably Fung is doing there in Defendant's 1027. Isn't that correct?
I would assume that's what he's doing.
And with regard to 1027 and those photographs, you're not an expert in photographs, are you?
No, sir.
And when you were being asked all those questions about where people were standing, you're just giving us your best estimate, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
In the final analysis, that photograph speaks for itself, isn't that right?
Objections, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Well, that's probably correct, Your Honor. I'll withdraw it.
Thank you.
But our guess is as good as yours regarding that photograph, isn't that correct? Where people were standing?
Sustained. That's argumentative as well.
All right, Your Honor.
Maybe we'll have one of our experts from the back row tell us what that is.
You generally want the criminalists on the scene quickly to ensure that no evidence has been moved. Isn't that correct?
You want the criminalists on the scene as soon as you're ready for them to conduct whatever the job is you're asking them to do.
As soon as possible, right?
As soon as you want them on, as soon as possible.
And in this case, the criminalists came after the coroners came, right?
As I previously stated, sir, I don't know when the criminalists came.
Yeah, I
But
think
you-
we're
okay.
beyond the scope.
You may be right, Your Honor, in that regard. Now, lastly, with regard to the phone conversation to Mr. Simpson in Chicago, that was the reason why you went over to his house. Is that correct?
Yes?
This was a phone conversation of no more than 1 minute. Is that correct?
I didn't go there to make a phone conversation. I
Well,
went
to
there to
make
make a notification, yes.
To him, right?
Yes.
And in the course of this, you've described for us that Mr. Simpson said to you, "What do you mean she's killed?" Recall that?
Yes?
And in the course of that, you've described for us that Mr. Simpson was very upset. Isn't that correct?
Yes?
That you had to try as best you could to try and calm him down and get him back to where he was, where he could be coherent on the phone. Isn't that correct?
So we could continue a conversation, yes.
Because you were trying to give him information. Isn't that correct?
Yes?
And you're not sure as you sit here now at what point you actually mentioned the kids or his children. Isn't that correct?
When I got him back on track and told him that I needed to talk to him and to calm down, that's when I told him, I says, "We have your kids at the police station."
All right, and after you got him to calm down so that you could make your statement, he then said, "What about my kids? Why are they at a police station?" Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
No. He responded to what you asked about the children. Isn't that correct?
He asked me why we had his children at the police station.
And it was shortly after that, was it not, that he then asked to speak to his daughter, and arrangements were made to pick up those children. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you never asked him to come back to Los Angeles. He volunteered to come back on his own. Isn't that correct?
Told me he was coming back on his own, yes.
And you described for us, I think, graphically, that this was a short conversation. Isn't that correct?
Yes?
And everybody was very excited. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah, I think so.
And you were excited?
I think so.
Mr. Simpson was excited?
I think so.
Arnell was excited?
Yes?
Well, objection, This states the evidence are not part of the conversation.
Oh.
Arnell was excited?
Well, I could tell she was upset.
She was crying.
Behind me, she was talking to Detective Lang.
Thank you very
Excited,
much.
or,
Thank you. You will not be upset if I don't ask you any more questions?
no, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Clark?
Detective Phillips, why were there no photographs taken of the shoes of the 4 detectives? That is yourself, Detective Furman, Van Adder, and Lang.
Because the request I received from Detective Lang was to take photographs of officers that arrived at that location that had gone around that crime scene location before the detective showed up.
By the time you got there, you saw the bloody shoe prints, they were already there?
Yes.
Here comes 3.
Wait, let me see if my eminent partner can talk me out of it. 1 second.
Anything as to shoe prints, shoe photos?
No, Your Honor. Thank you, May. Detective Phillips remained until on call.
Yes. All right, Detective Phillips, I'm going to excuse you for the afternoon. However, you remain subject to recall. All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir. All right, Ms. Clark, your next witness, please.
Yes, the people call Detective Tom Lang.
All right, Mr. Lang.